Thank you, sir.
All right, so if you could, let's go back. Now, what I want to do is I want to spend time just really on the budget. We know the good works that all the agencies do. We're going to kind of focus back in on the budget itself.
Yes, sir.
And so let's go back through the amended just as quickly as possible on the major hits, and then we're going to follow up with some questions that I know individuals have. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Go ahead.
In just working off of the tracking sheet that you have in departmental administration, just the normal reductions. When we talk about field services, of course, statewide changes, reduction in our travel and our P cards, reduction, I think, of a major one that you're interested in is freezing vacant positions. There are 50 sworn positions and 50 non-sworn positions and 26 sworn positions that we will be freezing. Of the non-sworn, there are 17 counselors, 27 admin support, and 6 public safety trainers. Moving down on 1824 is...
Let's go back through that one more time. I'll make sure I got those numbers.
Yes, sir.
So 50 non-sworn.
Correct.
26
sworn. Yes, sir. And when we say sworn, those are, of course, caseload carrying officers. Okay. And of the 50 sworn, there are 17 counselors, 27 admin support positions, and 6 public safety trainers.
27 admin, 17 counselors, okay, 26 was it public safety?
Trainers, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And then reduction in our contractual services through DocuSign and reducing our license from 119 to 60. And then another one that you probably want more clarification on, perhaps or perhaps not, is distributed workforce model by reducing physical footprint and closing 11 offices that are currently tenant at will. And then the transfer of 11 officers from the reentry field program, which really does not have a budget impact, but again, I think they're making sure that we can maintain the lowest caseloads possible. Moving to 18.3.1 under Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry, one reminder that I would like to bring up is the Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry technically didn't transfer to us until 2018. Mm-hmm. It had been done by executive order, so we had continued. You'll see some of those positions counted in that reflect that, and I'll go into those just a moment. But in there, reducing funds by freezing 7 vacant positions, 3 in reach, 2 housing coordinators, 1 faith and justice, and 1 business support analyst. 18.3.3, reducing funds by limiting travel.
All right, Mike, let's go back through those numbers again.
I figured that was going to happen.
Yep. Let's try it again. So we're 18.3.5, right?
18.3.2.
2, okay.
Yes, sir.
So freezing the 7 positions.
That's correct. 3 are in-reach coordinators. 2 are housing coordinators. 1 is faith and justice position, and 1 is a business support analyst. And these calculations were based on the entire fiscal year, so 12 months salary plus fringe.
How many faith and justice?
1.
1.
Yes,
and then housing coordinators were how many?
2.
Okay, we're on page 7 under section 18 of your track sheet. So he's following along the track sheet there. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir. 18.3.3 is reducing funds by limiting travel. 18.3.4 is reducing funds to reflect the operational efficiencies in the Georgia Prison Reentry Initiative. We are eliminating a housing coordinator position. Those are actually 5 positions. Eliminating 3 faith and justice positions. Eliminating 19 in-reach positions. Eliminating 3 reentry admin positions, suspending the PRI expansion in 5 sites, And those positions that I just noted reflect 3 months of savings minus leave liability for annual leave and retirement.
All right, so I got freezing 3, faith and justice, 1 housing coordinator, 19, is that?
In-reach position.
In-reach.
Yes, sir.
And then 3 of the admin, right?
Correct. Yes, sir. And then transferring the more responsibility directly to Department of Corrections.
And so let me go back
Yes,
on that.
sir.
So I think it was it last year or the year before that we expanded the number of community supervisors that were going to open offices and staff those with these different community coordinators. Was that 2 years ago?
Well, yes, sir. Not open offices, but create a prison reentry initiative site.
Okay. And so these are what we're doing is we're going back to those budget entries. Those were and those positions have not been filled. They're vacant, and you froze them, I guess, back in October just to once you got the directive from the governor. Is that right?
That's correct,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. And the sites that we're choosing not to expand to, where were those sites going to be?
I honestly do not have that offhand, sir. I know they were
Does Scott have it?
He should.
Maybe he'll.
And I'll get those sites. They are the sites that were requested. Last year we requested 10 sites and were funded for 5.
Right.
And the challenge was trying to see if we can some way, shape, form, or fashion deliver services to all 10 sites, even with the funding of 5, because these are, I wouldn't say low release sites, but they are lower release sites than the other prison reentry initiative sites.
The 11 offices that you're going to suspend on not opening, or actually you're going to terminate the leases on them effectively, where are those 11 offices?
Those offices are in Brunswick, Dallas, LaGrange, Cuthbert, Cordele, Swainsboro, Louisville, Ellijay, Waynesboro, Washington, and Hartwell.
You'll get that down? Oh, gosh. Let's try it one more time.
From the top.
Brunswick, Dallas, LaGrange, Cuthbert, Cordele, Swainsboro, Louisville, Ellijay, Waynesboro, Washington, and Hartwell.
Chairman Powell, is that one of those near you?
Oh, hell yeah.
Mr. Green, Chairman Green, is one of those near you?
One of them is near me.
Is that right? All right. Mr. Representative Williams,
Hey, Mr. Chairman, did have a question where you showed a reduction in funds. I'm sorry, when you were talking about your vacant positions and reduction around $5 million, how many positions are we talking about? I'm trying to keep up with this. And what are they?
Yes, sir. Under the PRI sites, if that's the ones you're referencing, sir, or are you looking at field services?
Field services more.
Yeah, if you're looking at field services, those are 50 non-sworn and 26 sworn. We have a total sworn position count of just over 1,500.
Okay. One follow-up. Help me with this. You reduced funds to reflect efficiencies in the transition program, the prison reentry. Explain to me the efficiency, what you're referring to when you say the efficiencies. I'm trying to make this come together because we're having an increase in prison population.
Yes,
and so, but we're cutting support staff. I want to talk about efficiencies. I was a productivity consultant back in the day, and I used to dazzle them with the names we had for things. So help me with the word efficiency and how that reflects and what does it do?
Well, when you're talking about the PRI sites, that's not being reduced based on efficiencies. We asked for 10 and we were funded for 5. So those are not by efficiencies. What they are, when we did the outcome evaluation study in the previous PRI sites, it showed a 15% reduction in recidivism.
Okay.
Well, when you start implementing a model that is not the same model that the evaluation took place on, there's no assurance that you're going to get that same reduction in recidivism. Another point to consider is when this grant was awarded of approximately $7 million, and it was a 5-year grant, Georgia Department of Corrections was part of that grant. When the grant ended, it is now solely with DCS. Hence the reason for the in-reach coordinator, that position will be not necessarily picked up, but those functions and responsibilities will lie with GDC. But it really has nothing to do with efficiencies. It has everything to do with being funded for 5 sites, trying to do the best service delivery model you can for 10 of those 5 sites that were funded.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner, thank you for that detailed. I don't know if Scott got us the places, those sites that were proposed for the reentry, but I know he's working on it.
We'll have that too, sir.
Okay, and then, all right, you had gone through 18.3.5, and I think covered that very well, and you were jumping down, I think, to 18.4. Is that right?
Yes, sir. 18.4 just reflects the normal statewide changes. And then 18.4.2 would reduce funds by freezing 1 vacant position, a compliance specialist that had been vacant since August the 1st. And then again, and this is all under misdemeanor oversight. Apologize, sir. And 18.4.3 is reduce funds by limiting travel.
Okay. Thank you. I know that y'all have moved, and this was years and years ago, moved from calling people into office locations and people putting field agents in the field to do the work. We had talked, you had made requests, there were bond requests for vehicles.
Correct.
And we were putting 1 vehicle per 2 officers, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, are we still in that where we do have enough vehicles per officer for the 2 officers to operate?
We do.
And you're able to share and rotate those? Now, do people drive into a facility to pick up a vehicle?
No, sir.
Or is it kept at the house?
No, sir. They are not kept at the house. They are kept at another governmental location that is closest to where their day would start to accomplish
Fire
field
station.
supervision. Fire station, school, police department, any governmental entity.
Gotcha. Okay, and that reduces mileage and it reduces the travel costs for the employees.
It does, and it reduces travel from across the state and crisscrossing. It also has a value add into an employee's time. If they're in a car driving 45 minutes into an office and then they have to get a state car to drive 45 minutes back and start supervising in the area they came from, that gets into a quality of living issue.
So when you're talking about limiting travel, how are you limiting travel? I mean, it seems like you've built in enough efficiencies into your current system.
Yes,
so
sir.
how are you going to make further cuts limiting travel?
The limiting travel is not directly related solely to field supervision. A lot of it is with training and leveraging technology. We look back on our training. Although peace officer standards and training, we're required to have 20 hours a year. On average, our officers were getting over 50 hours a year. Some of that was specialized training, but you're looking at anywhere from 25 to 30 on top of their required training hours. So naturally, finding ways to pull that back, doing more online training. I applaud Georgia Public Safety Training Center with their online training programs. We too have modeled ours to move to an online training where you don't have to bring vehicles in. And so that large part of that is travel associated with training.
So how do you deal with incidences where, in terms of training, to train individuals on how to handle a de-escalation moment or mental health situation or an addiction and a severe reaction as a result of that.
Yeah, there are some trainings. Those trainings that you referenced there are mandatory training. They're built into that 20 hours, so that's one that would not be changed. What we're talking about is the hours that are above 20 hours that are nice to do, and it does help with professional development, but it's not absolutely required, so we provided greater scrutiny for that.
So are you still, or is the department still going to provide that extra 30 hours of training, or is that now going to be effectively optional? Or is it?
Well, it was optional to start with,
Right.
And we try to keep it related to their job function specifically. But what has changed is the delivery method of it, perhaps. And you'll see some of the reductions in the public safety training position. That's directly correlated with that as well. Again, it's leveraging the IT capabilities that we have.
Okay. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the joint hearings, you talked about 18 to 24 months. You're either in the game or you're out of the game. You've got about 18, 24 months.
That's correct.
And you mentioned how long some folk are having to work with people, which you pretty much indicated was kind of wasted after that 24-month period. And during the 20 hearings.
I want to say, if I said wasted.
No, you didn't. You didn't use the word wasted,
Okay.
But when you said
get
24
diminished
months.
returns.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything after 24 months.
Yes, sir.
If you say that's it.
You get diminished returns if you
Diminishing
can't-
returns.
That's correct.
And diminishing returns really means you're wasting your time because you're not getting a return on your
Correct.
investment.
In that regard,
Okay.
yes, sir.
But in doing the 20 hearings, this subcommittee asked for you to come up with recommendations to change the sentencing laws. Do you have any of those recommendations for us today?
The recommendations that I would give personally and professionally would be based on research. It would move to a model that is a one-size-fits-one approach, where you sentence in accordance to the needs and risks specifically to that individual, and then you incentivize their completion of their sentence based on meeting the case plan set forth for those risks and needs.
Mr. Commissioner, I think Representative Williams is asking the right question, and this comes back to you had missed some of the first meetings, and so what we are trying to do is avoid chasing the rabbit, so to speak.
Right.
There are two specific questions we had asked for. Number one was you had referenced studies, and this is
Correct.
Representative Williams said that there are numerous studies that show the diminishing returns.
There are.
And so we'd like to have those studies.
I believe.
So it may be that, and I was just asking Courtney if she'd received them, so if we
Yes,
do
sir.
have them, we'll make sure we get the committee to them.
I sent, there were 5 studies sent directly, and I'll be more to you, and I believe to Courtney, I'll be more than happy to send it to the entire committee.
And the second request,
sir.
and so that's one of the requests. So the second request is that dealing, when Scott was here presenting, we'd asked him to give us recommendations, back to Representative Williams' question, of specific code sections that would need to be amended
Yeah.
in order to resolve that. Now, I have not seen those. I'm aware of the
No,
studies,
and
but not the
yeah,
code sections.
the studies, of course, do reflect that, and a lot of people call it dosage supervision.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the specific code, you really have to go offense by offense. And that's why I'm saying one of the best ways, there are different states that they incentivize it. Georgia has just done that through criminal justice reform with the performance incentive credit. But the problem is, well, I shouldn't say the problem with that is we don't have all the findings yet. Behavioral incentive date is set at the time of sentencing, and after 3 years, if they've done what they're supposed to, they go off of supervision, but it's only been 2 years into that process. So all of the data is not in yet because of the time frame. The other thing that criminal justice reform did was cap it at 2 years, and these are nonviolent offenses, and if they have successfully completed it, they can automatically be moved to administrative status or submitted to the judge for termination. That law, when it was put into effect with criminal justice reform, right off the bat, we saw a reduction in cases of 22,000 from that one change alone. We're optimistic about the behavior incentive date. But it would be irresponsible for me to make a prediction on data that's just 2/3 of the way complete.
Okay, so we've done this, we've had 3 hearings. This is our 3rd hearing on this. And my recollection is the same as Representative Williams, and that is that when you presented to the full committee, I was left with the impression, a very clear impression, that a reduction in probation sentencing time would free up field workers to do more cases or handle those cases better and provide more contact with the individuals, greater than the 10-minute minimum or the industry standard, so to speak, and that would increase the ability for success in avoiding recidivism. And so that was the impression that we were left with. So we took that information. We wanted to see the studies, but you're telling now what I'm hearing is that the law already provides for this, and you have a pilot program in which you're already doing this, so the results are there. So there's not really much we can do with this.
Well, I'm saying Criminal Justice Reform Council addressed that issue and put those into place. I think we can always do more because right now, as I said then, you're still seeing an average of probated cases being 6 years under supervision. You're seeing an average of probated cases that had a prison stay serving 8 years under supervision.
Okay,
What I'm saying is if you reduce the time under probation, but it would have to be offense specific. Like this category, for instance, they did not want to touch violent offenders. They were nonviolent offenders.
That's fine. So now we're circling back to where we started. And that is, we would like the code sections that we would need to amend to correct that so that the probationary period might be considered by the General Assembly to be lower than the 6 or 8 years that you're talking about. That's the request. We'll make it this additional time.
It would be everyone in the Criminal Code of Georgia that is a nonviolent offense.
Okay, so you'll send. So you're going to.
I'll send you the whole code section. That's what we're talking about for the nonviolent offenses.
All right, so we'll spend our time next week with you on that issue. So
Okay.
if you'll send someone over to my office, that's 220 Capitol.
Yes, sir.
Send someone over. I'll be there. I'll be there at 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, and we'll
Yes,
go through it and we'll pull the code out. Come prepared with your code book, and I'll go through it step by step with you, and we'll go through and work on rewriting that code.
Okay.
If that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do.
Very good.
Yeah. You want to go? Oh, Manny wants to come too. Okay. So,
And a follow-up before the PRI expansion sites that were originally slated were Okmulgee Circuit, Griffin Circuit, Cherokee Circuit, Lookout Mountain Circuit, and Conasauga Circuit.
Okmulgee, Lookout Mountain, Cherokee. What were the other?
Griffin
Griffin.
and Conasauga.
And those were the 5 that I think we're going to have 10 sites total was the plan,
That's correct.
right?
That's
And
correct.
so we funded for 5, and those
That's
are the
correct.
5 that will not be funded. Where were the other 5 that were to be funded under your plan?
I'll get those for you as well.
Okay. All right. Other questions from members of the committee? I got one here. President Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on that point. So I was taking notes. Everyone in the Criminal Code of Georgia that is a nonviolent offense, you're advocating to go down to 2 years for probation, or do you have a fixed term? Or is that something that we need to discuss?
That's something that needs to be discussed. That's, of course, left to the discretion of the court. And the point is, if you take an attorney, I am not, but if you take, for instance, entering an auto, it's going to have a different length of sentence capability than perhaps a burglary or a financial transaction card fraud or theft. That's what I'm talking about. Is it would all if the research is that 2 years, for instance, North Carolina has implemented a model where they have greatly reduced that amount of time. But if the idea is 2 years, and then you get diminished returns if you have not been successful with it, then that would apply to all of the nonviolent criminal penalties that are felonies in that. But right now, as it is on the books, each one of those offenses carries a different amount of time, whether it's violation of Georgia controlled substance, habitual violator, they all carry different amounts of time that they would be subjected to.
And what about for violent offenses? I recognize that the risk profile is higher, but
It
is
is.
there any guidance that's out there that's research-based?
I think one of the things that make the violent offenses, because the majority of those will go to prison, you have two things at play there. You have a lot of them are going on split sentences where they will have probation even if they max out their prison sentence. And then you have some that the parole board will actually parole, and then they'll still be under our supervision, just a portion on parole and a portion under probation. So it's a little bit more complex than we're talking about just straight probation cases.
Okay, thanks.
The other five are Brunswick, Waycross, Ogeechee, Middle, and Northern Circuit.
Brunswick, Ogeechee, Middle and Northern Circuit,
And Waycross.
Waycross. Thank you. Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael,
Yes, sir.
I've said this in several hearings. You and I have had a personal discussion, and I don't mean for this to sound negative, because I know what y'all are up against. Water runs downhill. Governor set forth who would be suffer, who would lose the cuts, and y'all had to come up with a solution.
Yes, sir.
But I'm still remiss. It keeps, and maybe I'm just locked in on something of concern. Is not because there's an office in Hartwell,
I understand.
because it's not like a parole office being in Hartwell. It's like a factory being there, because it doesn't create a lot of jobs. You're going to have the
understand.
same number of jobs.
Yes, sir.
And but I continue to have a concern that these sworn officers, I have a soft spot about the protection of any law enforcement officer, any post-certified officer that works in the employment of the state. And I wonder to myself, and I keep thinking, that by changing this system, by closing down the offices where the parolees, probationers, your clientele, where they have to come and report, and those officers they have eyes on, and there's more than one officer there. There's a multitude of officers there, and they have eyes on them. I understand the question's been answered that there won't be no more peeing in a bottle because you're going to do the swabs, and I understand that. But I have concerns that if we're going to send these officers out on that basis, for them to track them down, to me the mentality of these folks that come out in a lot of cases, that if they have to show up for an office, they're going to have a different demeanor than when your officers are having to go to their house to chase them down. And I just have a real concern that that's going to put some of our officers in harm's way, especially single officers going to those houses.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we know, that the most dangerous call that a law enforcement officer gets is when they're called to go to someone's house because of domestic violence or domestic dispute or something. And for those officers to be going to those homes by themselves, to me, I'm afraid it's going to put some of those officers in harm's way.
Yes, sir.
And,
Sure.
I know y'all have thought about all of this,
Yes, sir.
because y'all got all these answers, but I continue to have concerns about that one thing.
Well, and Representative Powell, I appreciate your concern. And as always, I appreciate our honest and open and candid discussions. I always have concerns about officer safety. I think I shared at Joint Appropriations, if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, that is it. But the interesting thing is, and I can speak to it from the creation of DCS, field supervision has been and continues to be done in the field. By closing the office, nothing has changed. If you 6 months ago you walked through any DCS office and you stand a far greater chance that there's going to be hardly anyone in it. Why? They're out in the field. That's where community supervision is done. When I started in this profession in 1989, I would drive my personal vehicle to houses. We didn't even carry weapons. And that's why I said it is so important that our officers right now, they receive specialized training in their communication skills, their supervision enhancement. We are trying to help them be successful. If you go in, when we talk about successful for offenders, success, it's not just the offender and the officer. That's the way it used to be done. Now you're engaging the family in it. You're engaging the community, because we can't do it all alone. And I can share with you personally, and I've seen firsthand where officers have gone out, they've been put into a negative situation, and it was the actual offender they were out there supervising that intervened and stopped something from going bad. That's because of the relationships that are formed with these individuals, trying to give them a head start, trying to turn their lives around. They're invested in it. When you talk about safety, I don't think you can get any more equipped. We carry semi-automatic weapons. We carry a taser. We carry an asbaton. We carry mace or OC spray. We wear a ballistics vest, and we have a personal emergency transmitter. We have cell phones. And they are well trained and well equipped. And they also know from the individuals they're supervising and from where they are going what situations are likely to occur or could occur. You can never be 100% prepared, just as if they're going into a situation where they know you need to have an extra set of eyes. 2 officers go into that situation. They know to go with 2 officers. Just as there's a likelihood of an arrest being made, you go with 2 officers. They know. That's what they're trained to do. That's what the supervision protocol calls for. And back in the 90s, our profession got enamored with the portrayal of it being effective, and I've got to tell you, being part of it, we were far less effective then, because we sat in our office 8 to 4:30 and said, "You come to me. You come to me." But yet we didn't go out to where they work and make sure they're showing up on time to let the employer know, hey, you guys doing good here because he's been negative on all his drug screens. Okay? When you go and talk to the family. So supervision today is totally different than what it was. And I think anyone that has gone on a ride along with an officer would see that firsthand. And that has come back directly from those that have. More times than not, they come back and they said, you know, Michael, I never knew. I never knew. I went to places in my county I didn't even know existed. And they had seen it firsthand. But these officers have always been going out in the field. That is nothing new. What is new, yes, it was easier with parole. What is new is the difference when with probation is there's a lot of court processing and intake that takes place. I went up to Calhoun yesterday in Gordon County, and it is exactly what we were called to do, is maximize use of state space. We're partnering with DFACS to have a portion of their office where an officer can do administrative work and things like that, and also with the sheriff's office, because these relationships have already been built with the state patrol. There are all kind of possibilities for us to explore with the state where that can take place. Again, I do understand the concern, and I greatly appreciate your concern, and you've been a staunch supporter of community supervision, and the state should be grateful for your support of that, and grateful for the creation of DCS. I was reflecting over my notes today. If DCS wasn't started, I can guarantee you what would have happened. Parole would have been coming to this body saying, I've got to have more positions. Probation would have been coming to this body saying, I've got to have more positions. And right now, statewide, our caseloads are lower than they have ever been.
What are those caseloads now?
Our caseload right now is an average of 97. When DCS was created, the average caseload was 120.
What is the average caseload nationwide?
Don't be sidetracked because there is no national average. There are recommendations
Okay, what are the
by
recommendations?
APPA that was done over 10 years ago. They would say 40 to 60. I'd love to have 40 to 60 on a caseload. There's no doubt about it. Our mental health caseloads have a 1 to 40 ratio. Our sex offender caseloads have a 1 to 40 ratio, because those are high risk, high need caseloads that need that attention. And back to your point, Representative, those aren't always the best cases to have just for 2 years, because we know for a fact they take longer to readjust, especially with a prison stance.
We'll have to look at those kind of on a crime by crime basis.
You really do. And going back to if I had a magic wand, it would be a one size fits one. Because we also get individuals on probation that as much as I'd like to say so, they don't need our help. They're self-correctors one time through the court system, and they're going to adjust and do just fine. And a lot of times we spend time with those individuals when it's those high risk, high need that we need to be seeing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a month in the community.
Right, and I'm sure you give your case officers the discretion to try to work with those.
We use a validated assessment that does that.
So under 18.2.4, you said reduce funds by renegotiating contracts. What contracts are you talking about?
This one, and it's a savings of $45,000. It's the DocuSign. It has moved us from the days of having to come into the office to sign paperwork. Now it's electronic. You can send it anywhere. But we reduced our licenses from 119 to 60.
Okay.
When we did a really hard look at that, we realized that those licenses were not being maximized the way they should have.
All right, and then what's your goal for trying to get in terms of caseload reductions? Do you have goals set that where you'd like to be in the future in terms of the caseload per officer?
Yes, sir. We did a time study, and I think I referred to this also. Whereas core correctional practices say for ideal contact, you need to have 20 to 30 minutes per interaction. We just did a baseline of 10 minutes, the minimum. Again, it's not how many people you're seeing. It's more what you're doing when you are with them. And what that would have to break down to, Chairman Welch, is the assessed level of the case, and that determines the time interaction on that. But basically moving from a contact-driven model to a time-driven model, and that is still in the works. But that is the shift of community supervision across the nation. Instead of just counting folks and doing, for lack of a better phrase, drive-by supervision, having meaningful, substantive contact where you can make a difference within that shorter time frame.
Some folks would need more time than others.
Absolutely.
What you were saying a little bit earlier.
I would say it, and you know what? I'd like to tell you I knew where my kids were right now, and I couldn't.
So what is the average time that your officers are spending with their probationers or parolees?
With the Deloitte study, it was, if I recall correct, I'll ask Bert Fluellen to correct me if I'm wrong, but we were seeing those individuals on average 4 to 6 minutes. And that's because we had to make those contacts.
But that's not sufficient, though.
No, sir.
Okay. So a concern that I have with the freezing of positions, Commissioner Nail, is that it seems like to me the more field officers you have, the more time those officers, fewer cases they'd have, and
Yes,
the
sir.
more time-sensitive cases they would have. So wouldn't having more, filling those vacancies, wouldn't that actually enable you to spend more time, more contact with these parolees?
I would be less than honest if I said that it wouldn't.
Okay, well, I mean, that's helpful.
And I will say, Chairman Welch, that was one of the things when we went down these budget cuts. The last thing we put on the table was doing away with positions. That's why we transferred to more officers. We recognize if you're going to start withholding, then not you per se, but if our budget is going to start having withholdings.
Yeah, if the governor's recommendation is going to be to make cuts at 4% and then 6% the next year, then you wanted to go through and cut everything except the field officers.
Absolutely right, and I will tell you, you'll see here there's a 2-to-1 freeze from non-sworn positions to sworn staff. And even in central office, if a position comes vacant, you better find a way to do without it.
Gotcha. Okay. Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Chairman. Just curious, in departmental administration, you're cutting it by about 3%, and same, but on the governor's office of transition support reentry, you're cutting that by 24%. So why cutting that portion, 18.3 portion, so much, as opposed to administration?
Well, that's where it goes. That would be part of administration. If you look at those specific positions, the name is still there, but for the past 3 years, we have been morphing that into our operations. But if you look at even in those funds, most of those are not direct line officer positions to begin with.
Okay, Chairman, thank you very much for that. Commissioner, thank you very much for all this information, and thank you for Dan and your staff looking up those questions while we're sitting here to get those answers for. I appreciate that very much. So, Chairman Ballinger and I will be here. We had planned to be at the Capitol tomorrow, so if you could send you or someone else can come up to talk to us about those specific code sections that we need to look at.
We will, yes, sir.
We'll be here at 9 a.m.
Yes, sir.
You can come to my office tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Instead of Monday, do it tomorrow because
Okay.
I'd already planned to be here, so I've got.
Sure. And Chairman Welch, just to make sure we're clear, are we talking about the nonviolent offenses?
Nonviolent, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We can certainly
That was
do
what
that.
your emphasis was.
It
nonviolent,
was,
so
yes, sir. Yeah, I think you're getting into two totally different areas.
That's not an area I want to delve
Yes, sir.
into. So
Be more than happy to
let's
do
focus on
that.
nonviolent.
Okay. More than happy to, sir.
We'll start eating the elephant one bite at a time.
I got you.
Is that all right? Okay. All right, good. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Scott, thank you for filling in last week. We have the Department of Corrections coming up. We have Commissioner Timothy Ward and his staff, and we appreciate you being here. And this time we've got the tables to set up instead of the podium, so.
Yes, sir. Again, thank you for having us, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And kind of, again, like I said last week, I want to set the stage before we get started. And the following recommendations are in section 19, which began on page 9 and run through page 11, your tracking sheets. One of the things when we approach this budget, like I said last week, anything that was a core mission position we did not touch. Correction officers, maintenance workers, counselors, food service, chaplains, teachers, we did not touch. Everything else was on the table. And as far as for a conversation standpoint, we're going to look at it in 6 categories: statewide changes, leveraging technology, business process improvements, facility management, revenue, and the governor's recommendations. You'll quickly see the statewide changes. Those are the governor's changes, and that's $942,844. That's DOS, agency insurance premiums, and spread across most programs. And next, we're going to start with our business process improvements, and that's 19.2.2. We reduced 3 IT contractor positions, and we reduced those through attrition. 19.23. That was the victim services. We just removed a manager position and turned it into a clerical position. We're still going to support the Office of Victim Services. That's a very important role, but we just put 2 clerical positions instead of putting a manager. That was a $117,000 position supporting 1 clerical person. 19.24, the department is freezing 18 vacant administrative program positions. These were either positions that were vacant for a period or during our analysis were determined that these duties could be eliminated and or absorbed by other team members, so we did that. 19.25, we reduced, this reduction reflects 1 position that was moved to a state prison. As you'll see as I go on to some more tracking numbers, we moved our mobile construction position back inside the wire, and that was one of the positions that we moved back into a state prison program. 19.28, the department identified 4 education administrative positions that could be moved to direct instruction inside the facility. Again, our mission was making sure that we shored up our frontline positions by putting everything that was at central office that could go behind the wire in a vacant position, we put behind a wire in a vacant position and eliminate that central office position.
Mr. Commissioner, how's that going in terms of moving admin to behind the wire? How's that?
Again, when you take people from that ordinary routine.
Yeah, behind a desk.
Yeah, it's a certain level of change.
So it's looking at a computer versus looking at the inside of the facility and dealing with inmates and dealing with.
Yes, and it's
I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic here. I mean, that's a. Put it bluntly, that's a hard ask.
Well, it's this kind of ask, and every person that was affected by change, I personally talked to those individuals.
So and did the salary stay the same? You're just moving the position?
Just moving the people. The salaries stayed the same. We didn't cut any salaries, moving behind the wire. Okay. And a lot of the individuals that we moved, they were in a position that was a frontline position previously. Okay. You know, one of the advantages of working yourself through the system, you want to promote from behind the wire and go to central office.
So to be fair, because I don't want the public or anyone to get a misperception, I want to be crystal clear on this. We're talking about those people that were offered positions to go back behind the wire that were in an office setting before.
Yes, or either in a regional position doing something, they just took their position inside the wire.
Those were already sworn officer. Are they sworn? Or they had the training to be behind the wire?
Yeah, those were non-sworn positions.
Okay.
And those individuals, whenever you're employed with our department, you have a level of training about your interaction with offenders. So we give them a certain level of training, but make sure to do what they do.
So there are positions behind the wire that are similar in nature. We're not talking about moving someone from an office to interact with inmates on a regular basis as a security officer or a correction officer, right?
Now in some of our positions that we go through some of those clerical positions that we offer frontline positions, they were either offered a correction officer position, a counselor position, food service, or maintenance position. And all of those are positions that you have interaction with the offender population.
Okay. All right. So the folks that we're moving, we're not asking someone, I'm just trying to make sure the public understands, we're not taking someone from that's working on the computer behind the desk and asking them to become a corrections officer. I mean, you don't want someone as little as I am going in there to be a correctional officer. You know, that's what I'm saying.
Chairman Welch, we do have people that are small in stature that become correction officers, but we wouldn't just take. Yeah, we wouldn't take a person that was a computer analyst today and put them on a dorm managing 96 offenders. That's a process. You would have to go to BCOT. You have to get retrained.
I don't think I'd last very long.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised what the human mind can do sometimes, the human spirit. Yeah. So I believe in you, sir. I have my faith in you.
You're ruthless. Well, that's right. I'm a step below. Al's over here cracking jokes at me. So
yeah, and but that totally.
I just wanted to be sure that really what I was getting at is I'm just trying to make sure that the perception is clear that we're talking about people that are able and trained and you're making the appropriate transitions, not someone sitting, like I said, a desk jockey that's sitting back there it wouldn't have the capabilities to interact with behind the wire. You targeted specific individuals and people that you thought would make the transition.
Yes, and I'm gonna be honest. You know, we of all the individuals, we had 23 people that were affected. Okay, we had 23 individuals that said, "Hey, I don't want to do this."
Okay.
I mean, they were offered positions, but again, they saw themselves. I cannot perform this job,
Gotcha.
So I'm gonna go somewhere else. And we had 23 individuals who chose to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question from Vice Chair.
No, not a question, just a comment, Commissioner. First of all, I appreciate you made a remark that resonated with me. I have Lee Arundel, of course, in my district up there, and had some good conversations with your new warden, with some people there. I know that there was some concern at first about people moving around, and everyone there was offered a job. And some took it, some didn't take it, but everyone were impressed with the level that you and your staff had in reaching out to them and talking with them personally and making certain they were taken care of. It allayed a lot of fears, and I know that insecurity is a bad thing, and just wanted to commend you on that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And in that administrative program, we had a total reduction of $1,989,390 in the admin support position. Next, you will see 19.3.2 and it's a cost saving of consolidating business office functions. We saved approximately $28,250 in this program. This reduction was affected one position, which was moved again to a vacant position inside of a facility. Next, I would like to discuss the health program budget, and that's 19.5.2 and 19.5.3. As you know, last year we rebid our mental and dental contract. The new contract was effective July 1st, 2019, and this included moving existing GDC mental health counselors and dental health professionals and related administrative staff to employment with the new contract, which was Centurion. 19.5.2, by transferring the duties to the vendor, we were able to freeze 9 vacant positions, which did not impact any healthcare delivery, and the amended FY cost saving for that was $353,329. 19.53 reflects the saving of transferring 95 positions to the mental and dental health contract for a reduction of $4,556,510. 19.5.4 reflects a reduction due to relocating 19 mental health unit managers to a security position, and that was a reduction of $690,390. Next,
Commissioner, can I stop you on the health side of this? I'm trying to understand how we go from how we save $4.5 million moving to contracts. Is that was that the way the contracts were bid out, and then you had that savings? So
the saving is because we took 95 GDC positions and moved on that contract, so we saved those positions because they were our funded positions, and we froze those 95 positions, right?
Yeah, we actually ripped them.
Yes.
Okay, so say that one more time. I'm trying to follow you. You had 95 positions that were going to provide health for dental and health care?
When we bid out a contract, one of the things about bidding out the contract entailed for them to absorb our mental and dental employees. Okay?
All of it, just take the whole thing?
All of them. So when we moved those positions onto their contract position, we were able to rip those 95 positions because they were going to that mental health contract, and that's how we saved the $4.5 million by moving those positions onto that contract.
Okay, but we're going to have to pay the contractor, right?
Yes.
So where's that anticipated cost coming?
The FY20 budget increased the mental health contract funding by $14 million, and that covered the new contract.
Okay, so we had an increase in 14 and a reduction in 4.5.
Yes.
So we had basically a 9.5 increase in expenditures?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay, never mind.
Okay, all right. Next is 19.55, and this is the governor's recommendation, reduce the EHR continuation funding. Next, you'll see on 19.6.2, the department, we changed the criteria for placement into an offender going to a county facility. Previously, an inmate could automatically transfer into a facility. I changed the requirement. I required our offenders now to either have a GED or a vocational trade prior to going to a county facility. That one change in policy saved us $1,325,000. And also,
how much did we put in the budget last year? Courtney, you remember in the budget last year, because we had upped the per diem.
Yes, this is different from the per diem.
Okay.
This is, I think 2 years ago, as a education incentive to the counties to offer GED and vocational training, we had added like $1.3 million in their budget, and we would pay them, reimburse them for individual either getting their GED or their vocational certificate.
Now they have to have that before they can go.
Now we are requiring them to have that prior to them going to county, and that we're able to reduce that by 1.3.
So that you're reducing the amount you're paying to the county facilities to give them GED training, Christian training.
Yes.
Okay. So this doesn't. So the money that we gave in terms of the per diem, because it was a $1, then we added another, so $2 total.
Yes.
I think is where we get. So that's still in the. That's
still
being
in
remitted
place.
back to the counties.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Has nothing to do with that.
Because I think I was a little confused last meeting, so
Yes.
I'm glad
Okay.
we got that cleared up.
All right. Next, you'll see in the governor's recommendation, 19.71, he has an increase for private prison funding, and that's a recommendation from the governor. Next, streamlining business processes, that's 19.8.3 and 19.8.5. a reduction of 185 positions. The department analyzed and re-engineered our administrative and business processes and identified consolidation of administrative duties. And by the reduction of those positions, we were able to save $6,114,458. Again, we reduced those positions. Those were clerical positions inside of the facility. We focus on putting those positions in core missions, either correction officers, counselors, food service, or maintenance workers. Of the 185 positions that we reduced, only 23 chose not to take a position offered. We had, of those 185, 37 became correction officers, 18 became counselors, 9 became food service workers, 11 became store personnel, 75 accepted positions in our new business processes division that we created for those, and of those, also 12 were at retirement age, so they chose to retire. So we affected 23 individuals by not taking position, but every person that was affected was offered a position. Next, on 19.8.4.
Chairman Williams, Representative Williams have a question.
Quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know 23 people chose not to take the offer. Are you monitoring or are you checking? Because my experience has been that out of those 180 some, very few would have said, "Hey, I want you to downgrade me to the kitchen." I want to. Are you checking morale and productivity between when the action was taken and the results 12 months out to see what's the real cost of making these moves?
Personally, no. One of the things, all of these individuals, vast majority of the individuals that chose a position offered, they saw an increase in salary because you're talking about frontline administrative clerk type positions. But that is a great point. We need to follow up with those individuals to make sure everything is working out smoothly. Now, I did talk to one individual. We had an interview. She was coming up for an interview for Deputy Warden of Security, and she was one of the ones chosen for the business process position. And she said early on there were some bumps along the way, but things are being smoothed out because like anything new, anything in change in state government, that's going to be a level of uncomfortableness and a level of ease. But I will make sure, again, follow up with the due diligence and make sure those individuals are taken care of. Okay, thank you, sir. Next, 19.8.4, the department will freeze 193 non-security, non-critical vacancies and distribute workload to remaining positions. We were able to do a cost savings of $8,984,763 by freezing those non-security positions. Again, we did not freeze any core mission jobs that were frontline jobs. We did not freeze all those non-security positions. 19.8.6, consolidated training. That was a savings of $319 and $319,290. We went to moving to a more online training, reducing in-person classes, and so we're just trying to evaluate that piece, and that's working out pretty good. 19.8.8, reducing part-time staff, savings of $2,652,394. We are reviewing all of our part-time positions and reducing them through attrition. Most of those are retirees that we bringing back on special projects, doing things for the department. And what we're doing as a project runs out, we're not renewing those positions.
Representative Williams.
Mr. Chairman, $2 million is significant. I'm having a real problem with if these $2 million. This $2 million is that dispensable. Why are we using so much part-time work if they're really that dispensable? Why were we using it?
When times were good, we had good times.
I like that. You're an honest man. So we went from chewing turpentine to spearmint gum, back to turpentine. Okay.
And that's where we're at.
All right.
Okay. 19.8.9, 19.8.10 and 19.8.12 education, a savings of 1,321,114. The department is converting 26 teaching positions to instructors. The department identified 7 education administrative positions that could be moved to direct instruction inside the facility.
What's the difference between a teacher and an instructor, and does it impact the GED or the graduation requirements?
You know, and Representative Powell can attest to me, we had several positions that were retirees that were working in instructors' positions that were making well over 6 figures. 3 years ago, we saw that was an issue, so we developed an instructor pay scale for anybody hired after a certain date. So we went back and just reviewed it, and we just moved those individuals back to an instructor pay scale. And I don't want to be a rapper or a rhymer, but you know, we're giving GEDs and vocational instructions, and we're not giving out PhDs. And we had GED instructors making well over $111,000, and also retired from the TRS.
Did we lose some of those folks?
Yes, we did. We lost some of those individuals because if you think about it, if I was going to move you from your $117,000 a year job to an instructor position on November 13th, if I'm really smart, I'm gonna retire or resign before then, and I get my payout at the higher salary.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some of them did.
That's right.
And then we'll probably see a lot of them come back and reapply for instructor positions.
I see. So yeah, we have the range, the pay cut range from anywhere from $37,000 to $4,000 in terms of reduction in pay.
Yes, and that was on average. So they didn't see real. Some of them, we had some anomalies out there with those. We had some retirees that came from TRS to ERS, and they had some huge salaries that, I mean, if I was a regular taxpayer, I couldn't justify that salary.
Okay.
Okay. Next on
Representative Williams has a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just gonna let that go. Oh, it was interesting, especially when I think of rural Georgia and a lot of poor school systems. The teachers struggle with part-time jobs to teach our children. We got 6-figure padded jobs for folk who are doing 5-figure work. The real cost savings is all of that wasted money on folk like your analogy. They're getting paid like they're teaching PhDs, and we're trying to teach folk just how to go out and make a living. It's not a good, and since you're a new commissioner, I can say this is no reflection. It's a terrible, terrible stain on how you run a state. And now we come and cut to the bone when we had all that fat slouching around. I just wonder how many more departments. That's a sad epitaph.
Well, let's keep asking, Representative Williams. So now we're looking at, so that means that the teachers that we had on there will be losing around $20,000, I guess, in terms of the revenues, but many of them are probably going to either retire or they've already retired or they've already decided to step down, and you're going to fill those with instructors.
Yeah, and one of the things we're hiring a instructor is a good job in correction. I mean, it's a good job for a person. I think our salaries are somewhat a little bit higher than some of these local school teachers, so we have no issue with hiring instructors.
Okay, thank you.
Next, 19.8.11, telecommunication costs. We had a savings of almost $2,030,354. We just went in and looked at who had cell phone, laptops, and landlines, and just cut that out. We had some instances that people had a cell phone, they had a Surface Pro, they had a desktop, and they had a landline. That was easy. Okay.
I would have liked to come see you earlier. I might have not been there, so
And 19.
No, they're cutting the jobs. You don't get one now.
19.8.13, assigning mobile construction to facilities. This will result in 45 positions being moved into the facilities. We're not stopped doing what they normally do. we're gonna continue to do our specialty projects around the state. What we did, we just regionalized how we did what we did.
So when you
Well-
say specialty projects, just so the public understands that when you talk about specialty projects, some concerns have been raised that from county and local governments that oftentimes contract with the Department of Corrections for a work detail to come out and perform services. Very, very good quality services that are performed, but it is a much reduced rate.
Yeah, well, this is totally different. This
Okay.
is mobile construction. Mobile construction, we build, we renovate courthouses, we build state patrol barracks, we build senior citizens, we do special projects, put on roofs on courthouses and things of that nature. And what was happening, a correction officer would, if he lived in North Georgia, he had a project in South Georgia, he would leave out on a Sunday, he would go stay in a hotel, we would pay for his hotel, give him per diem to eat each and every day, and we were doing that. We were borne that cost,
But those project teams are still going to be there.
they're gonna still be there.
Be active. I just want to make sure we kind of assuage those that are concerned that that they're losing
No,
the
no, no.
teams. Yeah.
No, what we're doing is we're regionalized. So if you live in North Georgia, and if you have a project in North Georgia, we will assign you to the facility nearest you. What you would do in the morning, you would drive to that facility, you would get your truck or whatever and go to your project and come back home and go sleep in your own bed at night. Instead of us paying for it. A lot cheaper, okay? And it's just common sense stuff. A lot of it just common sense things to do. We've not stopped doing mobile construction projects around the state. We're just doing it in a smarter way. Next is 19.8.4, reduce travel through utilization of online training, consolidating training courses, and foregoing conferences. A total saving there is $2,111,326. We're still going to conferences. I was just talking to somebody the other day. If you want my people to come to a conference, you pay for it, we'll go. Okay? Next, want to discuss leveraging technology. 19.8.2, timekeeping system. The department piloted a Chronos project in one location, and we reduced our overtime, FLS overtime, by over 50%. Previous to that, we paid almost $26 million in fiscal year 19 in FLS overtime. The present timekeeping method that we have now it's about 3 pay cycles before we can be able to reconcile count with an individual. Right, we're using the Chronos system, it's real time. A manager can see if a person, especially a post-sworn individual, if he's coming up on the 171 hours in a pay cycle, in a pay cycle, because anything over 171 hours, we pay a time and a half. And so now if, say for instance, Representative Williams, you're working at one of my facilities and we need somebody to work over, he can pull up and see Representative Williams is almost at 171 hours. We can't ask him to work over. We might have to go to employee B because he has 135 hours. He can work over. He's not at that thing. So it's a better management tool for our wardens and for our supervisors, and we can better manage that FLS overtime. You know, we're not compromising public safety, but we're just being better stewards of the state's money. Next is 19.8.7, virtual courts. Presently, GDC currently transport offenders to and from court for more than 17,544 hearings per year, which equals about 35,808 round trips, and that's including a correction officer. By using a video conference for a quick 5-minute hearing, we can save that individual from being on the road, traveling back and forth. We're projecting a savings of $1.2 million amended year fiscal 20. Right now, we have 8 of 49 judicial circuits on board utilizing the virtual court system. Our goal is to have 50% of all circuits on board by June the 30th, 2020. I talked to Terry Norris, the Sheriff's Association, on last week. The sheriffs love it because guess what? They don't have to get a road deputy to come and pick up an inmate from our prison to take back. He can stay on the road, patrolling in that county, protecting that public of those counties. So it's a win-win for everybody. Next,
Commissioner, is that net of the cost of putting in the technology?
Mm-hmm.
That is net of that, so because every circuit's going to have to put in the technology in their
Yes.
courthouses. So is that the local government's putting that in locally, or are we?
Locally, they put it in.
No, we purchased it last year.
We purchased it last year, so we purchased that for them for some of this. Not everyone.
We purchased. No, the locals pay for theirs, we paid for ours.
Yeah, we pay for ours.
Yeah, you're paying for yours in your own facilities.
Yes.
And then the locals are paying for
Yes.
it in their facilities.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Next is revenue increase to other funds offsetting state appropriations. 19.8.15 work details. Currently, we reimburse, the reimbursement rate for our correction officer, and this is what you're talking about, Representative Welch. This is the county work details for work details in the cities. And what we're doing, we're just making sure that they just reimburse us for the cost of the officers assigned to that detail. And that's a fiscal year savings of $1,106,000 by just covering the salary of that correction officer by taking that detail out. And 19.8.16 is the commissary. We are increasing the commissary prices by 2 cents. That's a fiscal year savings of $1,482,897. The inmates will see like a 2% increase. We're anywhere between a 2 cent to a 5 cent increase on different things. But that average pricing is still 40% less than retail pricing on the street. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, no, next we got TCs, the transition program on 19.9.2. We're gonna close the Albany Transitional Center. The facility was in significant disrepair, roof leaks, mold, structural issues, and the landlord would not make the necessary repairs to keep that open. 38 staff transferred to other positions in the area. We had at least 8 prisons in Calhoun and Altree, so those individuals were able to transfer within less than a 50-mile radius to stay there. We also transferred 150 male inmates to different facilities to absorb that. And the amended FY20 savings for that is $1,562,175. But I always also want to note this: we have 100 beds slated to come online at Smith TC, another 240 beds to come on to Metro TC. So we got a net gain of 190 new beds coming online, even with the closing of Albany Transition Center.
Let me go back real quick on the question on the issue about commissary pricing. You gave me the statistics, and I was trying to write them down, but I missed them.
Mm-hmm.
What's the distinction, or how much of a reduction in pricing is it between the purchasing the items in the retail market versus inside?
On
facility?
40%.
I'm sorry.
40%.
40%.
Yes.
And is that 40% at this new number of the 1.4
Yeah,
million?
40% at the new number.
Okay.
So we're still, and that's on average, and so they're still getting really at bargain price inside.
Are we paying? Is that we're getting more revenue out of it? Are we subsidizing the commissary items?
No.
In other words, are we paying below what the price, the cost is to Department of Corrections to purchase the items, put them in the commissary?
No.
Are these contracts that we do with individuals that work inside, or are these managed completely by our own staff?
By our staff, and also what we do, we pay our store positions out of those, out of revenue fund the commissary. We fund our store position with that.
I got you.
Okay.
Manny, you have a question? Okay. Representative Williams?
Right near the end, you caught my attention a couple of times with the commissary thing.
Mhm.
2 cents is in the grand scheme of things, is not bad.
No.
You were able to just
No.
move 2 cents and show that much savings overall. Somehow I'm gonna get back to what I didn't write it down, but maybe offline. I'll get to ask you this because
Okay.
it was some concern, not a great concern, but I did want the answer, Mr. Chairman. It slipped me. It's those birthdays, I swear.
Thank you, Representative.
And also, 19.9.3, the department's freezing one vacant non-security administrative position. Most of these duties were moved to the regional business office. 19.9.4, This was a GD Fast Track program funded in fiscal year 2016. Now that GDC has well established GDC training and testing, the facility, this Fast Track training program is no longer needed, and this resulted in a savings of $275,000. Okay, and we will.
Okay. Another question, Representative Williams.
The beds, when you closed Albany, 200 at Smith,
100.
100 at Smith, and where
240
Metro.
we're going to add up to Metro TC right here on Constitution Avenue. 240 more beds.
So all of these beds are just being transitioned from Albany there. It didn't require any additional employment, or what was the net results? What are the
The net result
results?
was 190 new transitional beds. It's going to come online.
It's going to come online. And
Yeah.
how many positions with
Yes,
those?
yes.
What kind of positions are we talking about equated?
That's gonna be funded in FY '21.
One FY
We
21.
have $7 million in the budget for additional positions, and it's all different levels. So there'd be like a superintendent and correctional officers.
How many, but we're talking about 240 in Metro. That's a far drive from Albany. I don't think anybody's going to commute that.
No,
So
no, no,
how's-
no,
how-
no,
how
no,
the-
no.
How's the
No,
employment
we're
going?
not. What we did, we have in Albany, we have 3 prisons within a 50-mile proximity of the Albany
Okay.
Transition Center.
Mhm.
You have Lee State Prison, Calhoun State Prison, and Autry. Those individuals transferred to those facilities.
Those,
And we
that's-
gave them
okay.
a choice of positions and what facility they want to go to. We gave them the choice of where they wanted to go to.
Understood. Okay.
Okay. All right.
No real markdown in employment?
No.
Okay, everybody moves.
And we were able to accommodate, I think some of the guys, some of the residents worked at, I want to say Tyson and over in Unadilla. And so we moved them to the Macon Transition Center so they can keep their employment and still go back and forth over there. Okay. That concludes my presentation.
Yeah,
That
you're
was-
there.
Okay.
Let me go back a couple of steps if I
Okay.
could. I want to go back to the medical side of this. And just, we are, I'm not going to make that 5 o'clock promise. So the way I'm going to keep it is this. Commissioner Oliver and Colonel McDonough, you guys are the last two on our list, I think it is. So what we'll do is, if we could, we'll circle back with you at 10 a.m. on Monday of next week, and we'll start there, because we're not going to make it, and I'm not going to keep everybody here past 5. So we'll get to GBI after this, and I don't want to keep you waiting. So if you want to go head on back, we'll do it on Monday at 10 o'clock. I think we're going to be in room 406, I think it is. I think it's room 406 here in CLOB on Monday morning. At 10 o'clock, we'll start the next round of meetings, and we'll go over the amended budget then, and then we'll probably go ahead and transition into the full budget, so that you can do that. So Commissioner Oliver, when you come back Monday, plan on doing it then, so that we can do the full. We'll do both amended and full, finish backing up on amended, and then complete full. And then I'm looking for Colonel McDonough. There he is. So if you could, we'll do the same thing. We'll just follow up on some questions we have on the amended, and then we'll go into the full, and we'll take y'all first off so you can be done in the morning on the Monday morning on the 10th. So that way you can. If I drive a little faster than Colonel McDonough, so he's told me I need to slow down. So that way I don't want to keep you waiting after 5 on Wednesday night. So with that, we'll go back, and I'm going to ask some questions about Department of Corrections. Okay. So Colonel McDonough and Commissioner Oliver, y'all are free to go with your staff, and thank you for being here. I'm sorry we're running longer than we thought. Yeah. So following up on this, I want to go back to the medical portions of it. I'm still trying to understand trying to get the cost savings down on the medical side of things. There's one thing I noticed that we're trying to cut back in terms of mental health. I know we talked about dental workers, but you put out a contract for mental health? Is that right?
It was mental and dental.
Yes.
So it's a combination. So that provider is going to do both.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And then on the other portion of it was with Augusta, we're seeing a significant cost associated with payments to Augusta Medical. So speak to that, because I think it was I think we'd funded about $37 million worth of medical expenses, if I'm remembering correctly. But were you able to renegotiate down the cost with Augusta at all? And if so, how much savings was involved with that?
Right now, we're still meeting with AU, Allen and their CFO, working out strategy session, how we can get back down to that contract level. And I think you have another meeting scheduled when?
In a couple weeks.
In a couple of weeks to try to, and everything is on the table, how we can cost cut and cost save.
And what's your goal in terms of the cut, in terms of cost savings?
Well, we're budgeted for $190 million.
But what are your expenditures?
Right now, we're projected to spend about 217, I believe it is.
Million.
So,
217.
okay, so we're doing, all right, 217, so you got a $27 million
Yes.
cut that you gotta cut. Now, when we cut to Augusta University, is that just gonna circle around, turn budget-wise back to higher ed?
I mean, are they gonna absorb that? Are they gonna absorb
Is
that cut?
it seems like, I'm just asking, it seems like a little bit of a shell game. I mean, we're cutting in this one department, but then that other department's gonna need the resources to make up that department, unless there are inefficiencies. Like, I mean, the way you've gone about it, you've looked exactly at positions, like Representative Williams was talking about the instructors and teachers. I mean, to the extent that can be found, that's gonna be found in another subcommittee with AU, not here, but I'm just kind of asking if that's gonna.
And that's the purpose of having these strategic meetings with them, sitting down, the people, the decision makers in the room, and say, you know, we're looking at everything. We're looking at how we deliver pill call. Everything, we're looking at it and trying to do cost savings and with some ideas. You about to say something?
Yeah, we've looked at some things like their contract rate for their providers for outpatient care or for care outside of the facility.
Right.
And the rates that they're paying those contractors, we're talking to them about reducing those rates to Medicaid rates.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also looking at reducing supply expense, looking at their labor model. They use a lot of temporary employees right now. We're looking to get them to fill full-time and keep inmates behind the wire for care. So we're looking at a lot of strategies. And based on our contractor that we brought in to evaluate the medical care, we can save, if we can implement all the changes, we could save a good bit of money.
Yes.
In the $20 million range.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what we're doing, and we're aggressively, and again, I think I gave Dr. Killershaw, he's adamant about being forthright and helping us reduce this cost.
Okay. All right, and then I had a question from Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to 19.7.1. At our last meeting, you said that it was all going to be used for pay. Is that for Core Civic and Geo, or just one of them?
Just Core Civic, and again, the model, I think a couple of years ago, we gave them a per diem increase for salary increases. I guess their formula wasn't in line, and they came back and adjusted that formula, am I right, to be aligned, and that's to adjust their formula.
And that all goes to COs,
Yes.
correctional officers.
Yes.
And contractually, don't we have a contract with them that allows for an incremental increase? And for many years, we've held back on making any real seismic increases, while we've also done it while on our side, on the public sector side, doing increases for COs on that side. Other questions?
Yeah, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
So what are the rates? Do we roughly have parity between state COs and those at Core Civic?
And I couldn't tell you what their rate is for their COs. I don't have that. We can get it for you.
Okay. And then I'd also be interested in knowing how many inmates do they supervise versus what those in the state system supervise?
Well, there is literally about 8,000. We have 4 private vendors. We have 4 private prisons. Geo has 1, and Core Civic has 3, and they average about 2,000 apiece. And normally, any system you want you don't want your system to be at least over 14% in private beds, because if you had to absorb it back, it'd be astronomical trying to absorb them back if they closed or went out of business and absorb those back. So we have a good level right now with about 14% of our population in private beds.
And are all the private beds filled, or are there spaces within those prisons?
Contracted, their beds are filled. The ones that we have contracted, we have with them, those are filled.
What we can afford budgetarily, we use every dollar to keep them filled.
Okay. And is there a reason why GEO hasn't had amendments to their contract for salary adjustments?
We did that.
They did, and they did their formula the right way, and so they got their adjustment. And so, of course, Civic is coming back now trying to get the right formula, get the adjustment that to equalize them also. Yes.
Okay.
Representative Williams, did you have a question? No. Okay, all right, good. And then a couple of other things that I'm looking through here, on the healthcare costs, we touched on that. Is there I'm curious, is there a ratio that between correction officers and inmates that's either, A, what is our ratio? And then B, is there kind of an industry standard for what that ratio should be, or recommendations for the ratio of number of correctional officers versus inmates?
It's depends, because some states some states are union states, and by contract they have to have a certain percentage rate. Our ratio is anywhere between 1 to 96 to 1 to 120. The ratio of correction officer to offenders.
And that just varies depending on the prison, the
Yes.
capacity of the prison, and
Yes.
and then also the nature of the offenses, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
So you said the other states are going to be, or would be unionized facilities, so there would different ratios there.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a national standard or a norm that is recommended? And if so, by whom and?
Well, and we're going through now ACA accreditation with the American Correctional Association, and we've accredited on 18 facilities already, and we've passed the standard, so we're in good shape as far as our ratio of depends. And again, it depends on the facility, the mission of the facility, and we're good that way.
Okay, good. And you've gone through that process, and are you accredited now, or?
We're in the process. I think we're 24 months. We try to do at least 4 a year. Okay. And so we're in the process of doing that.
So you do for each facility gets accredited, is that
yes,
right? Okay.
Yes, it's accreditation. Then you have to do it after 3 years. I go back to get reaccredited. So
how many do we have accredited now?
You have our numbers, guys? We have 18 facilities accredited.
18?
Yeah, 18 out of 34.
What? Okay, that's it. And so you're just working through each one of those systems.
We're doing 9 a year. I got my facility guys behind me in my ear.
Yeah,
so we're doing 9 a year.
See him telling you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, okay, well, that's very good. Then, is there not seeing any more questions? And I don't have any more. Courtney, is there anything we need to touch on that we missed? Okay. Uh-oh, a parting shot or a parting question?
This is the season. What is the state of the correction system, in your opinion?
I think I said early on, I had a personal goal of 14 months of trying to see us making a difference. And the Georgia Department of Corrections is a very big ship, and we're slowly turning that ship. The first indication was last month. I think we had a net gain of about 46 correction officers. That is a positive. So we're almost 12 months into my tenure, and so we're seeing some positive gains. And we're doing a lot of things to enforce the retention piece of taking care of staff. I changed the mission statement, and I changed my top 5 priorities. And my first priority is staff first. In order for us to change the culture and get everything going, we got to take care of the staff first, and we're doing that. And I'm just so proud of the team behind me, especially these guys sitting next to me behind me. They just hand me the book, and I just read it.
I like that. They were looking a little mean at you a minute ago, so I'm glad you said, waiting on you to give them a little play.
Okay, all right.
Let's see. Representative Green, is that you?
It is, as
Chairman Green.
the commission is getting ready to leave. Mr. Commissioner, it is a good captain that turns a ship slowly to keep it balanced. You don't want to throw the passengers off the ship.
Gotcha.
Captain Green Cow.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job, and appreciated the information today at the committee on gangs, and you did a great job with your staff and everything. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was reflecting back as we're closing on something that you said to the joint committee, and because it caught my attention, but we ran out of time for questions. And it was about the program that you have that is evidence-based and that you're employing and that you expect to see very positive returns. Can you tell us just a little bit more about that and then the plans going forward?
Yeah, that's what we presented to Representative Green and his committee. You know, we have almost, Derek corrected me, we have over 15,000 validated gang members. Trying to keep in line with the governor's mission. I know he's dealing with the inmate population. 71% of our prison population is violent. Of those 15,000 gang affiliated, those are ones that we validate. We have to go through a validation process to validate those. So for those individuals that say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, we got to have a safe haven for those individuals. And our safe haven for those individuals is our evidence-based prison. And when I say evidence-based, we're only teaching and delivering programs that have been proven to work. And that's what we're using. Right now, we have over, I think it's 52 individuals who have renounced their gang affiliation. We also, that's Hancock State Prison. That's a close security level 5 facility. And half of that prison is evidence-based, meaning we get half a 1,500 population, almost 800 of those individuals say, hey, I want to do what's right. And that's huge. We also have Lee State Prison. That's a medium secure prison down in Leesburg that is fully evidence-based. We also have a dormitory that's at Autry State Prison, and that's a medium secure facility. We also have another dormitory that's at Smith State Prison. That's a level 5. The winds are catching on about evidence-based. Those individuals who want to make a change, we just got to make sure we have those opportunities for them, and that's what we're doing with the evidence-based facility. I want to share a link with all you all about, we have a YouTube video about what the guys testifying how evidence-based have changed their life, how it has changed, how violence has came down with those facilities. I think if we're going to turn this ship, turn it slowly, it's going to be with our evidence-based facilities because they are coming.
And I'm guessing that that's going to require more skilled COs, right? Because the skills that they're going to need to interact with inmates.
The first trait or first thing training that we do is we train the staff first. Okay? Before we even train offenders, we train the staff on evidence-based practices. Because if the staff don't believe in the program, it's not going to work. And so the staff are the big, we have facility calling, we want to be evidence-based prison. We want to be evidence-based prison. But it takes time because you can roll it out wrong. We're rolling out slow and methodical to make sure we do that. And so it's working. But you're right. It has to be, we have to train the staff first before we even do anything. And so we go in and get the staff to get the buy-in because you have COs teaching classes. You have COs because it's accountability. It's a big accountability piece, and everybody has to buy in.
And is the plan, last question, is the plan to scale this across the entire system? And if so, what's the time frame for that?
I don't know if we can do it the entire system right now because, like I said, whenever you roll out something like this, there's going to be some growing pains. It's going to be some manipulation on the gang members' part. Hey, I want to not do it anymore, but they might want to get in and try to circumvent the process. So we got to be slow and methodical. But I want to. My vision is that every prison will have a evidence-based component in it. Maybe 1 or 2 dormitories, might not be the whole facility, but it'll have that component. Because you got to have those individuals, got to have a place to say, okay, I need a safe haven to get out of it and stop doing it. And that's our ultimate goal, to do that. And once we do that, then we can attract and retain employees and do that. We were able to cut our budget because we had a lot of vacancies. And that's why we did a lot of things. But I want to have some more hard decisions to make because I got employees at my system.
Thank you.
Okay.
I keep looking over his shoulder because his facilities coordinator is right behind him, and I'm watching him nod his head. And so far, I haven't seen him shaking his head, so I'm like, yeah.
Well,
okay.
I hired him. He better not shake his head.
I can't. And Commissioner Ward, you keep shifting this way, so I've been shifting this way. Well, let me just say, I think the committee has expressed, as a number of members have, both privately and publicly. Commissioner Ward, your staff, I think, has done an exceptional job. Caution from Representative Green, Chairman Green, about steering the ship, but I do want to commend you, as I've said from the first meeting, your first public presentation. It is clear to me that you actually did go through and look. I mean, the amount of time that you spent, yourself and your staff, going to each of these people that have been working with your organization for years, to offer them to make this transition and explain them to them, that kind of personal touch is not lost on me at all. I don't think lost on anyone here. And it shows the level of time and thoughtfulness that you all put into this to make this work. And I just want to commend your staff for doing that. It's fantastic work what you've done. You came in and you have all these numbers and you've gone through this. I'm really skeptical on this medical side of this issue, because it's always been a consumer of taxpayer dollars on the medical side, and so I'll be interested to see how that works out. But commend your staff, commend everybody's hard work, and thank you for being here again today. Okay. But I don't have any more questions for you from the members of the committee, so what we'll do is we'll go on to GBI next, and that will be our last entity to hear from today before we try to adjourn. Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, we are tentatively scheduled for the 10 a.m. on Monday. We have that room. Shirley is working on the second room location, so that I'm having to work around the other schedules of the committees. So we're trying to be mindful. There are a couple members that serve on a couple of committees. So once I have that for you, I'm looking at Monday. Right now, I've got it tentatively Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. No, not 3:41. On Monday, it's 4:06. So Monday's 4:06, and we'll send out an email that'll have all the times and the locations to go over the fiscal year budget for 2021. And that's what we'll be spending our time on next week. And then we will hopefully conclude and work on the conclusions to the amended budget to ultimately get that out. And if all the subcommittees are prepared. So I will it was a long answer to say I'm still working on the room and the date and the times for the subsequent meetings. Definitely on Monday, 10 o'clock, room 406. All right. Okay, sorry. Director
right.
Reynolds, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chairman.
for being here.
I took a moment to get up here. I dropped Commissioner Ward a resume in case he had one of those GED teacher openings there, so I was teasing him about that. Well, thank you so much for being patient with us and staying with us this evening. I'll start right at the beginning and work my way down.
Page 14 of your track sheet.
Yes, section 30 for the GBI. 30.1.1 is just the adjustment to the agency premiums. That's a statewide change. I'll move right into administration, into the meat of what the budget is. 0.1.2 is a reduction of funds by decreasing the travel cost. Basically, that's just what it says it is. We'll be reducing traveling in our administrative section of the Bureau. 0.1.3 is the reduction of funds by freezing 2 vacant positions. Those positions are a legal secretary that supports the lawyers of the GBI and a finance accounts receivable position, and that will be savings to the tune of about $144,000. Those are the reductions and cuts in administration. Moving into CGIS, which we refer to as GCIC at the Bureau at .2.2. As I discussed with this committee last week, we are in the process of eliminating and stopping doing some projects and various things that we've done over the years that I believe are outside the scope of the GBI's core mission. One of those was the disposition recovery project. That's where we were sending individuals out to various Superior Court clerks' offices to help them catch up on their work that they sent to us for GCIC purposes. Also, the elimination of SORB positions. That's a Sexual Offender Review Board. Previously, the legislature had taken that assignment or responsibility away from SORB and reassigned it to the Bureau. I met with the SORB director. She wants that back. I believe it's appropriate to give back. I will tell the committee that that affected 8 positions, 6 of which were funded by user fee money, 2 which were state. We met with each one of those 8 individuals personally, offered them other positions within the Bureau which were open, comparable to what they had. 4 of those individuals took us up on those offers. 3 went to the watch desk, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, what the good work they're doing there. Another filled in a separate state position. 4 chose to move to other places in their career and lives and left the Bureau. So those were the positions that were affected by the decision to remove SORB from underneath the Bureau. Also under CGIS, we'll be eliminating 5 positions. Those 5 include 3 training positions, a programmer, and a project manager. All of those savings combined will result in about a $1.1 million effect to our budget. Point 2.3 is a further reducing of funds by freezing 2 vacant positions. We currently have a CGIS compliant specialist position that will reduce that staff from 8 to 7. And we have a CGIS analyst position that we're freezing that will reduce that staff from 11 to 10 individuals. That savings will result in about $130,000 reduction to the budget. So those are the effects of the budget to CGIS or GCIC.
And how many, going back, I think you told me that you had a total of 3 frozen vacant positions, or no, 3 vacant positions in the administration, and 2 of them are going to be freezing those and collecting that, capturing that money. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So we're keeping 1 position open and funded. Is that right? In the administration?
Yes, that's correct. Is that correct, Connie?
There's a total of 5 vacant.
Okay. 5 vacant. And then, but how many are going, so out of the 5, how many are, is that 5 vacant that are funded, or is that 5 vacant total and 2 are frozen?
All but 1 is funded,
All but 1.
so 2 would remain vacant after the reductions and are under recruitment.
All right, so 3 would remain funded, and you're trying to fill them.
A total of 4, excuse me, are funded.
Okay.
2 will be frozen and 2 will be recruited.
Recruited?
They're under recruitment.
We're
to
actually
fill them.
looking to fill them.
Okay. And then on CGIS, on that same, following that same line of discussion, we're freezing 2 vacant positions, so those positions will no longer have money associated with them. How many other vacant positions do we have in CGIS that are funded?
At this point in CGIS, there are 25 positions vacant in that department of the Bureau.
And those vacant and funded, so then would that leave us with 20, is that net now, we're 23 vacant, or is that 20, we had 27 and now we're cutting 2? That's what I'm trying to get at.
So there are 25 vacant, 8 are currently being recruited.
Okay.
There are actually additional positions being cut. There's the SORB positions, the director mentioned.
Those eight positions are SORB.
6 of them
Six
are
of 'em.
user fee.
6.
Mhm.
Yes, and then there are 5 additional. There's a total of 13 being reduced in CGIS in the budget cuts.
That's the Criminal Justice Information Services.
Correct.
Dave was just asking what CJIS stands for, so.
Yes, Criminal Justice
Okay,
Information Services.
so out of CJIS then, we're seeing 13 positions that will no longer be funded. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
And that leaves us the balance of the 12 that are going to be, 8 of which are recruited, so that leaves us 4
4
that
vacancies,
are vacant
yes.
and funded.
That's correct.
Got it, okay. All right, sorry, I'm just trying
That's all
to break those numbers down, and I know it takes a minute to look at y'all's spreadsheets too, so, okay, so we're on to forensic scientific services, and my recollection was that we had, I'll let you go ahead and present, and then I'll ask.
Certainly. Yeah, the forensic science services are what we refer to as a crime lab at the Bureau. Under point 3.2 is a reduction of funds by eliminating 3 current vacant scientist positions, 2 vacant lab tech positions, and by capturing some delays in hiring. Those 3 scientists are spread out among 3 separate disciplines now. The toxicology, the firearms, and the impressions are latent prints. The lab techs are in chemistry, 1 in chemistry and 1 up at our Cleveland, Georgia lab up in Northeast Georgia. We'll also be holding 2 promotions vacant. Those promotions are an assistant manager position in chemistry and a scientist technical leader in forensic biology. Those, by not filling those vacant positions and capturing delays in hiring, that'll be savings to the budget to the tune of about $705,000.
All right, so let me walk through those, make sure I've got them straight. So we got, you're eliminating 3 vacant scientist positions. Of those, 2 were vacant positions in chemistry.
The science positions currently are a vacancy in toxicology,
Okay.
in firearms, and in impressions or latent print section.
And then the lab techs, where are they?
The lab techs, 1 is in chemistry, and 1 is in the Cleveland lab. I apologize, I'm not sure exactly what area, what he does, what that individual does in Cleveland lab, but I can find that out for you.
I guarantee you, if it's in Cleveland, that's my district, it's important.
Yes, sir.
Leave it alone.
It is.
It's gone. So,
It's database entry, Representative, yes.
That's important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
well, that kiss it goodbye. So what I wanted to ask you about these cuts, though. Now, we had funded the construction of the Pooler facility that had could do the science. This had a science lab associated with it for bio and for chem, and also had
Tox, firearms.
tox firearms, but also we had we expanded the facility to deal with more of the autopsies.
Medical examiners.
Yeah,
facility,
medical
yes, sir.
examiners. That's what I was trying to remember.
Mhm.
So I know we built the facility. I got a request to come down for the ribbon cutting, but tell me about the operations of that. I don't see anything in here to address additional funding for the operations of the Pooler facility.
Well, Mr. Chairman, speaking in absolute candor, that's a beautiful facility. It's state-of-the-art, but we don't have any money to run it, to operate it. Not enough. We're going to need in giving numbers to this committee, and again, speaking in full disclosure, we're going to need probably $550,000 to operate that Pooler lab the way it needs to be operated. That's utilities, literally power, water, things of that nature that we've exponentially estimated out for the remainder of the cost of that.
Were any of these science positions, the toxicology, firearms, impressions, were any of those in the Pooler were those going to be assigned to Pooler?
No, sir, they were not.
Okay. So you're just talking 550 in terms of operation. You're just talking about keeping the lights on, paying utility bills, and water is what you need to operate. How many staff scientists do you have down there, and in what gradation? And I don't want to go through it all right now, but I do want to know.
Certainly.
So if you could provide that to us, so I can see what the breakdown is, what you had slotted for in terms of providing X number of scientists for these particular different subject areas, and how many that we filled versus how many are still vacant.
Yes, sir.
So I can see, did we staff this? What I'm really getting at is, did we staff Pooler to meet the needs that we anticipated, that the agency anticipated, or have we understaffed it and we're just, running it at the bare bones right now? That's where I'm going with the
All right.
question.
We'll make sure we get that to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I think it's important, and I asked Cleveland Miles earlier, and I appreciate him being here. I appreciate, and he is your assistant director of.
He's actually the new director. He's the director of our crime lab.
Welcome. So Director Miles, if I might, I'd like to pause right here, and I'd like you to just walk the committee through as swiftly as you can what it takes when you bring in biological evidence, so DNA evidence, for example, in a rape kit. Can you walk us through as succinctly as possible what that process is, what your office does with that evidence? And you have to come up to the podium or a microphone. Sure. The podium's fine.
Okay, so I'll try and go through as quickly as possible, and really just kind of touch the high points of what happens when an item of evidence comes into the laboratory. The initial step is actually performed outside of the lab, and that's going to be performed by the agent or the submitting agency. They're going to complete a submission form online, completing the information that's necessary for a submission: victim name, their case number, their case agency, a quick description of what that evidence is. And so what that does is cut some of the time for our entry technicians on the front end. They don't have to capture that information. It's captured electronically online. So when they bring the item of evidence actually into the laboratory, they have a printed sheet that has that information on it, a barcode that we can scan once an evidence technician takes that evidence unto themselves. And that pre-populates that information for that investigative request into our laboratory information system. So at this point, now the technician is going to take that pre-populated information, examine the evidence that's been submitted, and they're going to take photographs of it just for documentation purposes, and assign the correct service request on that item of evidence. Once that request has been done, there's a technician that'll come from each of the disciplines to retrieve that evidence. And since we're going to talk about, let's say, sexual assault kits, we'll have someone from forensic biology come into that evidence intake area. They're going to get that sexual assault kit. It's going to go up to the forensic biology department, and from there it's going to be assigned for testing. And once we start the initial testing, when we're talking about a sexual assault kit, we can jump right into DNA. Some item of evidence, require screening to be done, prior to the DNA service being initiated. A sexual assault kit doesn't require that, so we'll be able to open that kit and really get started on it right away. We're going to itemize that kit, looking at the contents of it, just so that we know what's contained within it, and so we know which way we're going to start with our evidence processing. When we talk about processing kits, we talk about kits singularly, but it's really processed in batches, so in bulk, and that's really a more efficient way for us to process a sexual assault kit. So when I'm speaking about it, I'm going to really be talking about one kit, but just keep in mind there's probably 5 kits that's moving along in this process. Okay, so a kit is inventoried, and we start taking our samples, and we're going to extract it. We're going to place it into a robot to help with that extraction process, kind of a little more of an efficient process than what I started with by doing it by hand. So it's going to move through that initial phase of that analytical process. And I'm just going to skip all of the special steps within it. Once we get to the point of getting at that DNA profile from the sexual assault kit, let's say the vaginal cervical swab, and if we have an associated known individual, the victim as well as maybe a subject, we're going to get the DNA profiles from all of those individuals. We're going to do a comparison, interpret the data so that we can issue a report for it. Once that report is done, it's issued and dispatched on our website for the customer to retrieve it so they can get the information for it. And of course, the submitting agency is going to get it as well as the associated district attorney's office. And they get the report, and we actually go and we'll testify when called upon as an expert witness. There's a DNA profile that's eligible for CODIS. It is entered into the database upon the completion of that case, that report. So prior to going to testify and as such, once there's an associated or eligible profile, once that report is generated, it goes into CODIS and it's uploaded if it's eligible on a national database.
Okay. So how long does it take to run a batch and from the time you bring it in and log it, run the batch and to when it's uploaded to CODIS? How long does that take?
Well, typically when you're dealing with the batch, you're dealing 5, 6, 7 cases at a time. And if there was nothing else that was distracting you or pulling you away from the bench, you probably could do it in about 20 days. If you're looking at a special circumstance where there's a priority case and the only thing you're focusing in on and you're there for every step to move to the next step, you can do a single case in about 10 days. But again, if you think about it, you're moving 6 or 7 sexual assault kits through the process in about 20 days.
Is that per scientist?
That'll be about per scientist.
So
yeah.
So if you're working on one specialty case, then that's going to be one scientist will take 10 days to do that. But if you can do it by the batch, then it could be 20 days, and you can get 5 times that amount done. Well, actually, you're only getting about 50% done more.
Correct.
Yeah. So,
but it is a little more of an efficient process of those kits.
How do you distinguish between doing a single batch for one kit versus a batch kit?
Well, the typical operations is going to be done in batches. That's more of an efficient usage of the instrumentation because they're set up that way so that you can operate in batches. And also in the processing of it, when you get to the point of interpreting that data, that's going to be more of a singular approach. But in getting it through the analytical process, that's going to be a batch. The only time we really will really separate ourselves from that process is if there is a special circumstance, a high priority, maybe a public safety concern because there's a serial rapist out. And so we want to get that kit and that DNA profile analyzed and in the database as quickly as possible. So we will, remove it from a batch because time is of the essence at that point.
Cut it time in half, yeah.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us then on average how many kits a trained scientist can process, and I'm talking sexual assault kits, in a month?
So when we look at the lab system as a whole, there are about 100, 110 thereabout kits that's processed a month as a whole. So when you really break it down to per scientist, the way they're assigned their batches, they may get about 5 kits to work each of those trained scientists that are able to do so. And they'll work those 5 for that month.
Okay. I'm going to use an operational term from my MBA days, but flow rate. So the flow rate is basically 100 to 110 for the lab with current staffing and personnel?
That's correct.
Okay. But we receive about 200 a month, right?
That's correct.
So so I understand that's about 22 scientists then working kits?
Thereabout.
Okay. Say that again, Representative Holcomb.
Well, it seems like we're always going to be behind under that math.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you really do need about 10 more scientists to keep up with the flow. And
at least.
And that's horrible. I mean, it's horrible that many sexual assault kits are coming in. I mean, that's horrific.
That's correct.
It also means that law enforcement's doing their job, but, if not for what Representative Holcomb had done before and raising some attention on this issue internally in the General Assembly, with the House acting and the Senate acting on legislation to try to remove that backlog. We added, I think, 10 scientists, I think it was, to address that. If I remember correctly, and Connie, it was 10 scientists, so we funded those positions, but those scientists are still there. I mean, it's the same 10.
So, I mean, as far as the forensic biology department is concerned, the majority of the staff that's been added recently, when we look at the sexual assault or just DNA in general, most of those staff have been added through federal grants, the DNA backlog reduction grant, and we've done that purposely because we do have access to that money, so that we can add the staff as we need to. And I know we're specifically speaking on sexual assault kits, but if you think about it comprehensively, we're just talking about being under when it's relating to sexual assault kits, not to mention everything else that has to be processed with DNA. So yes, we do need at least 10 more.
Good.
Right, and that's what I wanted to get into, because what we heard was that you're not cutting in that department. It's just that current staffing isn't sufficient for the workload that they have, correct?
That's correct. I mean, we're taking steps upon ourselves to make sure that we're trimming any fat that we can in the process. We've had our outside agency come in and map our actual operations for forensic biology and drug chemistry, just to see if there's a way that we can be even more efficient with the staff that we have, the instrumentation that we have, and then the load that's placed on that we have to work. So we are looking at different operational changes, training methods that we've kind of employed, where we're not training someone completely before they're introduced into the process. They're allowed to, learn a portion, get started, contribute, and we'll work them along the way as they continue their training. So there's a lot of things that are being done, but ultimately it does sometimes come down to the personnel. You need someone to press the button. You need someone to do the data interpretation, someone to write the report, and ultimately testify.
Another thing too, Representative, is we look at the potential or the possibility of, for example, in drug identification cases, outsourcing those particular type of test. There may be a circumstance where if we get to a point and we're capable and able to do that financially, Director Miles may be in a position to begin training some of those people who have tested drugs for years to begin doing DNA testing. Because as I mentioned to you last week, we got 22% of the sexual assault kits done resulted in CODIS hits.
Right. Yeah.
22%. So that's a little over 1 out of every 5.
I think we all agree that you're doing exceptional work. So that's the issue isn't a criticism about the work product.
Sure.
The issue is really addressing the victim's needs with justice as quickly and promptly as possible. And so when we see shrinkage in the budget for forensics, it raises red flags for us. And you talked about this before, Director Reynolds, about trying to find process efficiencies, and that's what I'm hearing from Director Miles. But it's I'm not sure that you haven't sold me on the idea that you're gonna make up for 10 scientists in process efficiencies. And just being very candid about that. And then in addition, you're talking about federal grant money to provide to address the backlog of the rape kits, but those are federal paid, and those are only there as long as the grant money is flowing.
That's correct.
So there's a question in my mind is do those scientists, can they be converted over and hired into our forensic lab at the time that the grants expire, or are those grants good for extended periods of time that we can rely on to make up for the 10 scientists? Because I understood that we have effectively gotten through the rape kit backlog. Is that right?
We had.
Okay, so that was like a year ago. I think we completed the entirety of that. I think you had a press announcement about that.
Yes.
So I think that's been addressed, but Representative Holcomb's pointing out, you've got 200 coming in, you're dealing with about 110 to 106 each month, 200 coming in, you got a short, so you're building another backlog.
That's correct.
that is just sexual assault backlogs in general.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's our concern. I think that's what we're trying to weigh, and we have, I think, a real issue with that. And so we want to be helpful. So what would help us is to know the federal scientists, the grants for the federal forensic scientists, how long will you have those positions paid for by the federal government?
So each of the grant cycles is 2 years, and of course, within that 2 years, you have that amount of time to spend down the funding. And to be honest with you, we've had those federal grants for a number of years now, but I'd hesitate to say that you can count on them. At some point, they may go away, or even the funding may change. So amount that we were awarded one year may be drastically reduced a following year.
And how many are federal grant scientists?
Right now, we have 19 individuals that are in that forensic biology department that are on federal grants. Of those 19, we have 4 that are lab technicians, and then the remainder are scientists, so 15 scientists.
And I think the ironic thing, Cleveland, help me if I'm wrong, is what frequently triggers the ability to get federal money is having a backlog.
That's correct, sir.
Yeah. So out of the 22 scientists that we were talking about before, if I'm the ballpark, 22 scientists that you're using for the forensic biology, 15 are federal.
Yeah, and so actually, as we're talking about, that number may be slightly higher because we do have scientists in the Southwest Laboratory that are performing casework, the Coastal Laboratory where they're performing casework, and of course headquarters.
So out of the 110 month, how many of the federal scientists are working on those, handling
On the
those
sexual assault case?
Yes.
So we have approximately 10 that are serologists that are going to have some dealings with sexual assault kits. So the remainder are going to be DNA scientists, and all of them are going to be eligible to work sexual assault kits. They're trained to do so. I don't have the exact number, and I apologize, of the scientists that are currently trained to be able to do that. But of the DNA staff that's in the state, we have 10 that are not eligible to work a sexual assault kit for DNA, but they can contribute when there's not a kit present, such as when there's clothing, bedding, things of those nature. So really, when you think about it, the entire forensic biology department for the state at some degree works with sexual assault kits to get them processed and out the door.
Okay. So I think you went over this before, Director Reynolds, at the last meeting. What percentage of the sexual assault kits are, I think you broke them down into time frames. How many are 30 days old? How many are 60 days old, 90 days old, if I remember correctly, but I didn't take very good notes. Can you refresh me on that?
Yeah, in reference just to the sexual assault kits?
Yes, sir.
I believe the only numbers we had on those were what we consider to be a backlog, and that's anything over 30 days old. As of our meeting last week, we had 768 sexual assault kits that fit in that category. I broke down the total number of cases in our crime lab as to dates, but I did not break it down specifically as to sexual assault kits. But I would venture to say, and I know Director Miles will please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is that those are a top priority for the lab, sexual assault kits are, and we try to move on them as efficiently and quickly as possible.
That's correct.
Okay, so we got 768 then that are over 30 days old.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and those are the ones you're focusing on. You're trying to get those, but the problem is you just kind of have more come in that you can get.
It never
further.
stops.
Yeah,
Correct.
and this isn't a recipe for a solution. This is just a recipe to continue developing a backlog. That's not. I don't think was that.
No, I was just coming to Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We're digging a hole.
Yeah, we're our Chairman Ballinger's right. We're digging a hole, and our concern is that we tried to solve a problem 2 years ago, and you all did that. We gave directives and money, but your team solved that problem. We don't want the problem again. To say 5 years later we've got the same problem of 4,000 rape kits. These are sexual assault kits, but nevertheless, that haven't been addressed. Tell me this: how many scientists do you need, and what's their pay to hire the requisite scientists so that you can test the 200 rape kits that are coming in on a monthly basis to turn those around. And then when you have a lull, those scientists could be put to some other use. How many scientists would we need?
So the number you threw out is 10, and that's very close to what we'd actually need if we're going to specifically address sexual assault kits. And what that will do for us is have the ability to test the kits that are coming in the door at a level where we're not constantly adding to the backlog. Together with some of the outsourcing that we would do, that'll help eliminate the backlog. But again, the problem is if you have a leaky pipe and you mop up the water, if you don't fix that pipe, you're going to be mopping again. And so we do want to avoid that. So that number, if you say 10, absolutely, that's going to be enough to get us to the point where we're working the cases that are coming in the door at a level that we're way over what's coming in the door. So we eliminate the process of adding to that backlog and creating another batch of kits that's going to need to be tested.
And then those scientists, if there is a lull, and then those scientists could be put to other use. I mean, it's
absolutely.
Their time's not going to be wasted at all, right? I mean,
no, there's no shortage of DNA cases that are waiting to be tested.
But and these are scientists. I mean, these aren't folks that are limited to only doing serology or DNA testing. These would be people that could do other
depending on
testing,
the background. Right? Depending on the background, when you talk about hiring folks in the forensic biology department, there are very specific requirements that educationally wise that they must meet. So you may not be to take that same scientist that you started in DNA with and apply them to chemistry, because they're going to have specific requirements as well, and vice versa.
Okay.
If we're lucky enough to get a very versatile candidate,
you're not cross training. It's not a cross training kind of position.
Not in every instance, no.
Okay.
Not in every instance. We've had some folks that we've been able to cross train, but that's not always a solution.
I was just thinking of other cost saving measures with you, but so we're going to need 10 scientists that meet the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
For forensics. Go ahead.
I want to ask a couple more questions. The pie chart that we were shown at the joint hearing with the overall backlog had 16,711 forensic biology items that are backlogged. So I know we've been a little myopic in just talking about the sexual assault kits, but and I understand that we have a 1.03 million DNA backlog reduction grant. I don't know how much it costs to process each one, but I'm pretty certain that's not going to clear the entirety of the backlog. So we're still behind just generally in forensic and biology, notwithstanding the conversation that we just had about sexual assault kits, correct?
Correct. So to outsource a case, it's about $700, closer to $800. And so when we have $1 million to spend on outsourcing, that's about 1,400 cases.
Yeah.
And so we've got, you've just stated the numbers, that's not going to eliminate the backlog. So that will contribute to reducing it. But again, if we're able to get to the point where we stop the bleeding, we stop the cases from continuing to be added to the backlog, multi-prong approach. You can spend $1 million to help eliminate it, but if you get those positions, then you kind of really start to solve the problem and eliminate the increase in that backlog.
And would 10 scientists overall give you what you need to be able to do across the board to just get forensic biology to be at sort of equilibrium? At
this point, 10 scientists would put us in a very good position, not only to handle the sexual assault kits, but the homicides, the burglaries. And if the need was there to shift any of those scientists, let's say, to the database operations to address the increase in the first offender samples coming in, that's an easy cross-train, as you mentioned. That's an easier cross-train. We can send that scientist, hey, you can now work these offender samples that may need an additional person to address the increase in those samples as well.
Representative, too, I want you to remember what we mentioned the other day is that in that forensic biology, literally at the end of calendar year 2019, Department of Community Services said we're going to send you these first offender cases to follow under the guideline of HB 470 for DNA testing. And that jumped somewhere in the neighborhood, Cleveland helped me, of around 8,000 cases just like that.
That's correct.
So it was down, not that 8,700 or so is low, it's not, but we're talking about all of a sudden at the end of the calendar year, dumping 8,000 additional cases into that group as a result of HB 470.
Director, if I could paint a picture for you, last September we had 810 offender samples that were submitted. I'm sorry, September of 2018. September of 2019, there was 5,400 that were submitted. So there's a great increase of what we were getting in the door just for offender samples. And that, we did not have the staff nor as a scientist or entry technician to address for that type of increase at that sudden moment.
Okay.
I'm going to let Representative Chairman Belton go ahead.
If we were to try to replace those 10 scientists, would add the money into that, would you hire 10 scientists or would you use the money for something else?
If I can speak, I mean, hiring would be the priority.
Certainly, and I do want to make sure that I reiterate this too. I think it's our obligation in the Bureau and the lab, and certainly my obligation as a director, is to look at every conceivable way that we can work more efficiently in the lab. One of the charges that Director Miles has been given is that we look at everything. We look at our operations. We look at outsourcing. We look at how we do business. But yeah, certainly, if there was additional monies to hire for the purposes of hiring scientists, then that's what we would do.
This is obviously a legislative priority for us. I noticed that the Bureau of Administration, y'all cut that by about 1%, but the other areas you cut by quite a bit more. Why is that?
Well, we looked through to try to find some ways to do that. I will tell you that I do envision, without speaking too much out of turn, I do envision another reduction to administration that I didn't see coming in the reduction of one of the higher positions. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn for somebody that I shouldn't. But we just we just did our best to look through all the areas we thought were appropriate to cut, and that's the best I can respond, sir.
And overall, there's about a 3% cut to the total package. Is that correct?
To everything?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the governor's asked for a 6%. Is that correct?
It's 4.
Yep. Thank you.
It's 4 for fiscal year 20, the amended 20.
Representative Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to also just go over a couple other parts of the pie chart. Some of them aren't terribly bad. They're in the hundreds. But chemistry has a backlog of 17,815. And then firearms, which I'm assuming is related to murders or pretty significant cases, has a backlog of 3,454. So can you quickly go through a similar exercise of what we've already done about, on average, how long it takes for these to be processed out, and if the 10 would also help cure the overall backlog of the entirety of the pie chart that we were presented with?
So firearms, what we have now is scientists working about 10 firearms cases a month. And so it really does take about that amount of time to go through because of the type of evidence and the comparisons that are done. That's about 10, maybe 11 or 12 is what they can do max. With 10 positions, obviously 10 in each of those departments would be fantastic. Probably a little overkill for firearms, but they're not very far off. Even though the number is less in some of the departments, it's really relative to the time that's necessary to process that evidence. So, you work 10 cases in firearms, it's really the equivalent of 80 cases in chemistry. And so we really have to think about it that way, not necessarily just as the number. Chemistry is severely understaffed as well when you talk about the amount of cases that are coming in. And part of what we're doing, and I know the director mentioned this last time, is really looking at the services that we're taking into the laboratory.
Yep.
And so, that's going to be a part of this as well as we look at what positions, if you have 10 positions added to chemistry, what is that really going to do, for the cases coming in the door and that backlog, maybe not adding to that backlog as such. But it would be a very helpful addition to have, additional staff in chemistry. That backlog that they have Those scientists are working 80 cases a month on average. The majority of those cases are priority cases. So they're not really digging into the backlog at any great degree because there are so many cases that are old that they're having to focus solely on the priorities to the greater extent.
And let me ask the question a little bit differently.
Okay.
We get the backlog, but do firearms and chemistry and the others, do you have the same deficit in the ability to process the evidence timely as you do with what we discussed for forensic biology? In other words, are you receiving on a normal basis monthly more evidence than you have assets to deal with it?
Yes, that's an accurate statement.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, could we get a breakdown on that? So we're after 5 here, and I'm trying to be sensitive to y'all's time and ours too. I think having a breakdown of that, Director, would help us understand and help us set priorities. So, you know, as we look at this, clearly you can tell that the committee is probably going to recommend to the full committee that we shift money from something else to provide scientists. We are looking, Courtney and I are looking diligently to try to find that money. And that's not you. It's not your recommendation to us. And so, to be clear, the governor has given every single agency across the board a flat 4% cut on amended and 6% on the full year 2021. This is our committee looking back over time at what has been priorities for this committee in every single one of these sectors. And where we think that should remain a legislative priority, that's where we're going to try to assert. And to do that, we have to look around within the budget to find out where we're going to make a cut here or there in order to capture the money to put back in scientists. That's just the nature of it's one pie. We have to figure out how to divide it up. And so we understand that the governor has made these recommendations, and it has encouraged a very deep dive by a lot of agencies into efficiencies. And that's always a good thing to do across the board with government when you're spending taxpayer money. So there's support for that in that sense. But at the same time, Director Miles, and Director Reynolds, to be very frank, developing another backlog is unacceptable. That's not your fault. People are committing crimes and you're getting the evidence. It's our job to make sure that we give you the right people and tools in order to address that backlog. So the 3-person cut in the amended, and then a 9-person cut, if I remember, in the full, that's just, we're not addressing the issues here. We're getting further behind, frankly. And so I think that's the concerns you're hearing from members of the committee. And so we're going to look at that, but in order to do that accurately and to be fair to the other agencies from which we may have to reach into, we need good numbers on scientists and where those scientists need to be, whether it's in firearms, whether it's in biological forensics. We need to have that information. If you could provide us that information, what I'd like to know is what you need to stem the tide. A few years ago, we got a white paper that we needed 53 scientists. Of that, we were able to put in a number of them, but we were still 28 short, I believe, of what you needed. And then you needed lab techs in addition to that. And so there were quite a number of people. And then we've opened Pooler. We need to make sure we've staffed Pooler so it's effective along the coastal region. So if you can assist us with providing us what you need in terms of, we know we need 10 right now for the biological forensics. What do we need in terms of the firearms, and what do we need in the other areas? And truth be known, we're probably not going to be able to address all of it. But I don't think we're not going to ignore the issue here. We're going to try to do what we can to address it. So if you'll help me with those numbers, if you'll provide those to Courtney, then that will help us do our job and from what we think is a priority. And I want to encourage you, Director, and thank you, Director Miles, to keep looking for the efficiencies, because we're not going to be able to solve this problem in one budgetary cycle. It's not going to happen. And I know that your endeavors to be very frugal with the taxpayers' money is going to yield results, and the process is going to get better. It's going to get faster. You're going to have a good outcome. But that's going to take time to develop that process, and I don't want to increase the backlog while we're waiting. Let's not wait. Let's be proactive on both sides of this. We can take 2 tracks on it and try to accomplish the end goal of being timely in our evidence production.
Mr. Chairman, may we also, as we do that, if we believe, for example, in chemistry that that's an area that's ripe for the purposes of outsourcing, may we also include that as part of what we're suggesting to the?
Yeah, I want to get rid of this backlog. So, I mean, I think, we want to know how much it'll cost to outsource it out so that you can take care of that. If it's $1 million, that we want to know. And that may be with the DNA, but also maybe with the chemistry as well. So we want to know what that's going to be.
I do believe too, and Cleveland, help me if I'm wrong, that for example, the HB 470, the DNA on the first offender, that a good portion of that can be done by the hiring or by the use of lab techs, additional lab techs, as opposed to just a complete blanket, we need scientists. Is that a fair statement?
That's great. A combination of the two for specifically the first offender samples.
Which is a good cost-saving measure.
Yes.
So, but if you could do more with a scientist, and lab tech has X number of skills and can do certain levels of testing, but a scientist can get you more testing, then we need to look at whether or not paying the extra money for the scientist actually gets you more product. In other words, gets more evidence addressed. So a lab tech may save you money here, but you could have gotten 3 times as much testing done and evidence produced with a scientist. So I do look at that. I think it's it is a good thought. But when I'm working in my legal profession, there are things that paralegals can do for me, but that doesn't mean that adding more paralegals is necessarily the best way to go. It may be that I need more lawyers that can go try cases. So I think you understand what I'm talking about, being a former prosecutor.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the director? Because I'm gonna let us suspend for now, and we'll pick it up on. I know we didn't get to regional investigative services, to your field offices or regional investigation, and you have 12 vacant sworns. But I think what we'll do is try to cover some of that offline.
All right.
And get that information, because I want to be respectful of people getting home.
Thank you.
So with that, what I'm going to do is we'll pick up, and we'll revisit a little bit of this on Monday, but we'll be focusing mostly on your FY21 budget.
So we'll be in Monday. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to
okay.
go ahead and plan on being here Monday. So we'll pick up there.
All right.
Good.
10 o'clock, Mr. Chairman.
10 o'clock, and we're going to take over DJJ and public safety before you. So if you come in at 10:30, you'll probably be right.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to men and women of the GBI and their service to the state of Georgia. Thank you all for the presentation, the information you provided. We're adjourned.